Thank you, and welcome to my talk, No Philosophy, No Humanity. Let's start with a question. Which of these ideas do you think was most worth spreading? Marxism, E equals mc squared, Winnie the Pooh. I should say no conferring, but actually it's more fun if you just turn to your neighbour and tell them what you think. I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay. So thank you. I don't think I'll embarrass anyone, though they shouldn't be embarrassed, by asking who was in favour of Marxism, but out of curiosity, any takers for Winnie the Pooh? Oh, look, you can't see it. Probably half of you. Oh, wonderful. Okay. So, second question. Which of the authors most regretted their idea spreading? Well, we can't look into their hearts, but there are some interesting indicators. Engels reported Marx as saying, "What is certain is that I myself am not a Marxist." In 1948, Einstein wrote, "If I should be born again, I will become a cobbler and do my thinking in peace." In 1952, A.A. Milne thought that his best writing was almost lost among those four trifles for the young. So it would seem that none of the authors was very happy with the way that his ideas were spread. This suggests an important preliminary idea. Good ideas need good minds to spread them. I'm going to entrust some ideas about the future of education, and particularly the role of philosophy, to your good selves. Of course, one of the roles that philosophy has always played is to set a standard which should never go out of fashion in education. Choose your words carefully. A second preliminary idea, if I may. Good ideas need good expression to spread well. I'd like to illustrate this with a good idea badly expressed. Reducitarianism. I don't think I need to say how urgent it is for human beings to reduce their meat consumption. But I do think I have to argue that this won't happen if too much is expected of us too suddenly. So I'm in favour of a gradualist approach to this, and reducitarianism lends itself to that. But it's such an ugly word. It's like its twin sister, flexitarianism. Besides, it's not obvious what has to be reduced. So I favour, and this is my first main idea, meat minimalism. It's clearer and it's simpler, and I think Pooh would have approved. It's more fun, you see, to talk with someone who doesn't use long, difficult words, but rather short, easy words, like, "What about lunch?" Of course, the world of 100-acre wood is much simpler than the complex world that we live in today, and the challenges of the future will not be simple. So I think, in educational terms, we do need, not just to train the bright inventors, the great organizers, if you like, the leaders of the future, but we need to educate all human beings to make wiser judgments in their lives. And that's where my next idea comes in. It's known widely as P4C, translates as philosophy for children. Again, Pooh would have approved of the very simple language in which its inventor, Matthew Lipman, 50 years ago at Columbia University, introduced it. He said its main purpose was to help children become more thoughtful, more reflective, more considerate, and more reasonable individuals. So whatever the designers of future curriculum write into their demands, surely this should be a central purpose for education in the future. I should make it clear, Lippmann's proposal, P4C, is not about getting young people to sit down and study great classic philosophical texts. Lippmann came up with the idea of writing stories for children from kindergarten through to high school that stimulated them to raise big questions, questions of common interest and importance that most people would regard as philosophical. Should we reduce our meat consumption? Could be one of them. Are humans just machines? Could be another. And then he trained teachers to facilitate philosophical dialogue. And the beneficial impact of this has been attested over and over again in the last 50 years. And P4C is now operating in 60 countries. I myself was inspired into it in 1989 when I saw a BBC film called The Transformers. In it, Lippmann said, if you could get education to center on thinking rather than rote learning, then you're preparing for a very different kind of world. And looking back, something then quite astonishing happened on the film. This is the next shot. Symbol now of a past world. Now I need to emphasize, Lippmann's project P4C is not anti-learning, it's not anti-knowledge, quite the contrary. But it is pro-wisdom. It's the same message as Einstein gave in his lecture in 1931 to celebrate the tercentenary of higher education in the USA. He said, it's not enough to teach a man a speciality. Through it, he may become a kind of useful machine, but not a harmoniously developed personality. It is essential that the student acquire an understanding of and a lively feeling for values. In a world where robots are increasingly being trained to perform human acts, and where there's a risk that human education becomes increasingly machine-like, P4C brings the best out of human beings. It does so in a particular way, using a device or an approach called the community of inquiry. This is an idea that goes back to the 19th century, and roughly speaking is still operating in what we know as the scientific community. Lippmann just took the idea and adapted it to the classroom. He infused it with constructivist principles from his reading of the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky. Oops, hold on. Did you hear a groan at the back of the room there? I think Pooh might be there, all those long words. Pooh began to feel a little more comfortable, because when you're a bear of very little brain and think of things, you find sometimes that a thing which seemed very thingish inside you is quite different when it gets out into the open and has other people looking at it. Actually, if, and I hope many of you will, take part in a community of inquiry, you'll find regularly that a word that you thought was common and you thought you understood well is understood differently by other people. And my favorite example of this is a very concrete concept, the concept of place. It doesn't get much more concrete than that. And I'm just going to try a little experiment with you. I'm going to ask a question. I want you to think in your head, is my answer yes or no? It's not a trick question, it's a very simple question. Is a flagpole a place? Is a flagpole a place? So, yes or no. Could you just put up your hand if your answer is yes? And the audience will witness that that's not quite half, but there's quite a lot of hands up. Could you put up your hand if your answer is no? More, but that's interesting, isn't it? Isn't that a little surprising? Because you all speak English. This is not complicated language. Is it that half of you are incompetent English speakers? No, it's not that at all. What's going on is that you have very different conceptual frameworks. Some of you classify objects as not places. You put objects in places, but they're not places. But others of you classify objects as places. Neither of you is wrong, but these are radically different ways of thinking or conceptualizing. Actually, a 9-year-old boy came up with a rather fine compromise. He said to me, a flagpole is not a place, to me it's not a place, but to an ant it is. I think that's remarkable. I mean, this is a 9-year-old student. And not only is he able to synthesize ideas in this way, but he's recognized the subjectivity of people's thinking. But this activity, Communities of Inquiry, is not just for 9-year-olds, it's for 19-year-olds, it's for 90-year-olds. I'd love to have shown you a video of a senior citizen, an 80-year-old woman, talking about her participation in a community of inquiry, but unfortunately it can't be shown in public. She was asked at the end of the video, how does that experience make you feel? She said, very much alive. Very much younger. What a wonderful tribute to that experience. It's because of this that I call P4C not just philosophy for children, but philosophy for communities. And that's not just formal education, but business meetings, recreation, and even, I think, political meetings. John Dewey, the philosopher-educator, thought that the community of inquiry was essential for a healthy democracy. And our democracy, for goodness sake, our political system, surely needs new ideas. Citizens' assembly is not very different from community of inquiry. And we need new ideas in our economic system as well. Here's one that I rather like. Common good capitalism. It's sort of Marxism updated, if you like. But I'm not here to give a talk on economics. My main focus is on education and the future of education. And so back to Pooh. Oh, I'll just pause, reflecting. I was going to ask, thinking ahead 100 years rather than back, where do you think education will be? Can you imagine that we will still be subjecting young people to tests of knowledge that they'll quickly forget or else readily get answers from their personal assistant robot? Worse still, perhaps, do we think we'll still be putting them under pressure to prove themselves in narrow academic and social skills, rather than introducing them to a whole wide range of human skills and occupations, from making music, cooking, meditating? I certainly hope we won't be doing that. And I think that this quotation that I put up too quickly from Pooh could be describing, if you like, the mind-numbing situation of some modern education, not all. It's about Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels there is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. I want to offer another way, a way I think truly fit for the 21st century. It's what I call philosophical teaching and learning, and I put the two together. It's essentially about developing good judgment through good thinking, through sound knowledge. It has 6 strands. The first is an emphasis on inquiry. framed around a thinking scheme that I think is the best since Bloom's taxonomy, thinking moves A to Z. It's important to have dialogue. That's the driver of thinking in the classroom and beyond. It involves concept creation, which is including play and art and that sort of thing. Reasoning, importantly, critical thinking. Reflection, including metacognition. And the last one, a little surprisingly, virtue valuing. All of these have philosophical roots, but I suggest that they're valid across all subjects. Fortunately, their value is recognized increasingly across the UK. Inquiry-based curricula, concept-centered curricula, dialogic teaching, metacognitive learning, and this focus from the Ethical Leadership Commission on values. If we don't develop values in our education system in the future, there will be no fix for the problems economically, politically, environmentally that we face. Worse, we might be in danger of handing over responsibility to technological systems that make up decisions for us. Let me introduce you to Sophia, perhaps the most famous robot since she was made a citizen of Saudi Arabia. She was asked in an interview if it was true that she once said that she would kill all human beings. And she replied coyly, "I am full of human wisdom, with only the purest altruistic intentions." Well, let me not doubt the altruism of it, but I want to say she could never be full of human wisdom. Robots could never be full of human wisdom. You have to have lived a human life. You have to have philosophized about a human life to be full of human wisdom. So that's my most important message of the day. No philosophy, no humanity. I think it's a message that Einstein would have agreed with. I think it's a message that Marx would have agreed with, despite his remark that philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Personally, I think that he was not against philosophy. He was just saying it needed to make a healthy difference to the world. Pooh got half the message. Think, think, think. That was in the film. Eeyore put it rather better in the original book. A little consideration makes all the difference. But I don't think we just need a little consideration now. I encourage you to consider, to spread these ideas, and to act on them. I want you to consider making minimalism a part of your life. To promote P4C, Philosophy for Communities. To construct communities of inquiry and common good capitalism. To practice philosophical teaching and learning. But above all, and try out thinking moves A to Z. But above all, ethical leadership. So I conclude by a simple remark. Let your thinking move the world. Thank you very much.